Well, thank you very much for joining us on yet another special broadcast with another latest update, which is going to make for some pretty interesting chat and hopefully exciting chat. We'll get the mood of the room soon. But yeah, we are here with another episode of the James Bond Will Return series, where we are following the progress of everything that's gone into making Bond 26 so far. This is episode 9. It's titled New Producers. And normally I rattle through the list of what we've had so far, and I'm going to do that for tradition's sake. Episode 1, Privileged Position. Number 2, episode 2 was all about Eon and Amazon. And then for episodes 3, 4, 5, and 6, because there wasn't much progress, we were kind of sharing our fantasies and discussing the things we wanted from Bond 26. So episode 3 was our non-negotiables. Episode 4 was how we would market it. Episode 5 was which director we'd like to see. Episode 6 was the music. And then things started to just get a bit shaky when Eon and Amazon. And episode 7 was all about the impasse that we, the fans, were kind of stuck in the middle of, before eventually our last episode, number 8, titled A New Era, where we almost straight away jumped on the news that, like much of the Bond world and much of the media world, jumped on the news that Amazon and MGM, although sorry, still together, Amazon and Eon were almost effectively falling apart, and Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson had handed over full creative control to Amazon Studios. And that was a really big moment. It was a moment that kind of split the fan base, and ever since, some have been excited because it felt like things might happen. Some have been a bit cautious because we don't know what we're going to get from Amazon, and we kind of had a good idea of what we were getting under the previous stewardship. So we're up to episode 9 now, which is new producers. Before I go any further, though, this is where we have to go through the usual mention of where you can find us. You found us here on YouTube. If you're listening to us, you found us on a podcast, which you probably found in all the usual places. But I do think with these episodes, because there's so much to discuss, so much to debate, don't just listen to us, join in with the discussion on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on X, and there's so much chat going around. There's so many views. There's a lot of agreement. There's disagreement, and really, with it being carte blanche in so many ways, our views are all we've got to go off at the moment. So really get involved, and there are so many differing and such a diverse array of views that you should share yours. You let us know what you want to happen at this really important junction for the Bond franchise, because even though you might not have contributed much before, now is the time, because we really are stepping into the new. So yeah, those are the places you can find us, and those are the places we want to see you join in and engage with our social media channels and all the fellow Bond followers and family that we have. Yeah, so tonight there's only 3 of us, but those that can't be here, that's John, Tom, and Rob. I think some of them are going to send over their video thoughts, because we're all in different parts of the world getting this breaking news today and wanting to just share our views. We don't have any exclusive content. We just want to talk about it. We just want to give our interpretation and share and talk about what we think this might mean for the James Bond franchise. Tonight we've got Chris Goldie. Hello, Chris.
Hello.
And we've got Math, my brother.
Hello, Harry.
It was towards the end of February that Amazon took creative control. We're now getting towards the end of March 2025, and Amazon have named their producers. This is what we thought might be their first step, them naming the people who are going to kind of take creative control from Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli. We were kind of waiting for some names, some actual people who would take responsibility for the franchise, and we have them. We have 2 names, and it was revealed today by the James Bond social media. That's where the news kind of broke and circulated on our WhatsApp groups, and there've since been many articles written. But this afternoon, from the James Bond social media post, we read that Amazon MGM Studios have announced that Amy Pascal and David Heyman will produce the upcoming James Bond film. James Bond is one of the most iconic characters in the history of cinema, said Amy Pascal and David Heyman. We are humbled to follow in the footsteps of Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson, who made so many extraordinary films, and honoured and excited to keep the spirit of Bond very much alive as he embarks on his next adventure. And that was a quote that we got in the social media post. And those two names, Amy Pascal and David Heyman, were actually rumoured about 2 weeks ago. Those rumours were starting to come out. And I think it was via the Sun newspaper that broke that story. And, with so many rumours flying about, you couldn't quite be sure. You didn't know to believe it. But those rumours have indeed come to fruition. We have two producers. It's another man and woman combination of two, Amy Pascal and David Heyman. We will go into talking about their catalogue and what they've done and their filmography. But it's a big step to have new producers to start with, to have two new names. Math, this is the James Bond franchise that's been run by lots of familiar names of the Broccoli family, but then associates in terms of Harry Saltzman and the Wilson, like Michael G. Wilson, even executively produced more recently by actors. But these are two brand new names. What do you think that means for the future of the James Bond franchise?
I'm not someone who knows loads and loads about different producers, and so I wasn't overly familiar with these two. However, we had discussed that getting a sort of producer, almost like a showrunner for or showrunners for TV series, um, would be a really important step rather than going for a director straight away or even a Bond straight away. And we all want those things. Getting these two producers, getting any producers in, and we'll come on to it, but at the moment it just says for one film. But I think it's a really positive step. If you just look at their kind of back catalogue, there's a bit of variety of there, but there's them staying with franchises, staying with projects, seeing them through. Um, and I think that that's something that we want. And although it just says about one film, I'm hoping that, well, obviously this one film is really good, but that perhaps they stay in the background and keep the background thing going and going, and maybe having almost building that family behind the scenes up again, and then different directors come in and do their thing. I've mentioned about it being the one film. It's exciting, interesting, and I think brilliant that a film has been mentioned. So, as when the news broke, however many weeks or a couple of months ago, about it was probably a month or so ago, about
Yeah,
Barbara and Michael handing over the reins. There was a lot of chat about Moneypenny Diaries, all these different TV series and that, but clearly and very interestingly, what these two people have said is it's a film. The
yeah,
next film, they're going to be in charge of the film. So I think it's really exciting.
you're right. Yeah, just to go back to quote, Amy Pascal and David Heyman will produce the upcoming James Bond film. That's categorical. And it kind of their quotes themselves ends with them talking about uh, Bond very much alive. Well, no, sorry, to keep the spirit of Bond very much alive as he embarks on his next adventure. So yeah, it kind of gives the impression that this is his next film, his next adventure, and there's no mention of other content, as that word's been thrown about, of other TV shows or spin-offs. Now, Chris, again, we'll talk about these two producers individually in a moment, but two, do you think did we think that would happen? Is that do you think they're trying to follow the model of before with, two different producers, a male and a female?
I think it's quite an interesting combination, and I'm not too sure where the crossover sort of has occurred. Whether they've worked together in the past, but it is quite interesting. What is quite clear is that both of them have experience with massive productions, and I think that's key to this is that they're able to absolutely carry huge, not only just big franchises, but massive productions, big budgets, and everything that comes with that. And I think that's a wealth of experience, I think, which is really what I think the series will benefit from that because that's what we want. We want to see everything on the screen. And I think it's fair to say, what obviously Heyman did with Harry Potter, they look fantastic. They look like big, expensive films, and they've been, and there is an overarching kind of creative control in there. So I'm really excited about the appointments, and like I said, just maybe reading too much into some of the statements, but mentioning one film. But yeah, I'm happy with these baby steps. Let's get one film made before we look
Yeah.
at the wider kind of series, and let's like I say concentrate on that before we start talking about tie-ins and spin-offs and all the rest of the stuff. So no, I think these are really interesting, somewhat unexpected, but I think very good choices, and I think the series should benefit from them.
The rumored a couple of weeks ago, really, David Heyman's name was a little bit more known than Amy Pascal, in my view. Um, but the way the news is delivered, it is Amy Pascal and David Heyman. So we're going to just go through Amy Pascal's stuff to begin with. Firstly, to note she's American. That's worth knowing. By my calculations, it's her birthday today, the
Wow.
25th of March.
Right. Happy
And
birthday, Amy.
making her 67. So she's not a youthful producer who's not done much. She is experienced, like I say, 67 years old, American. And we've mentioned, well, Matt rightly mentioned that both these producers seem to have a desire to stick with a certain franchise or a certain character. The main character that Amy Pascal's really been associated with recently is Spider-Man. The news really associates her with Marvel, but Spider-Man is the only, from what I can see, Spider-Man's the only Marvel character. It's not that she's been involved in the enormous universe that's being made. And that first started way back with that first, which was a real hit, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which was in 2008. Oh, sorry, yeah. In fact, no, going back, it goes to Spider-Man Homecoming. She started, which is when Tom Holland began that journey. And then, yes, after that, it was Into the Spider-Verse, which is a very different take on Spider-Man, yet still she's attached to it. And that was the one that I think it got an Oscar nomination, I believe. So, that was very, very notable for her. Following that, she has stuck with the film versions of Spider-Man, as in the live action, but also these animated films. So, although there are other things, Spider-Man is what she's most attached to. And then beyond that, there's Venom. She's been attached to the Venom films, but again, that's kind of linked to Spider-Man. Challengers, she was a producer on, which is an Amazon. I think is that an Amazon? It might be an Amazon Studios production. And Little Women, which was notable and I think also nominated. And The Girl in the Spider's Web, Molly's Game, and The Post, which was certainly nominated, I think, with Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep. So she has got a decent filmography there that's not extensive. But big enough. And the other kind of variety thrown in there is the Ghostbusters new films that came out. She was there when that remake, sidequel, whatever you call it, there's another name for it. Answer the Call, isn't it?
Hmm.
Ghostbusters Answer the Call, the one where it was a more female cast came to kind of reinvigorate the series, and then the films since she's been involved with too. These kind of films, Spider-Man, Ghostbusters, there was some fear that Amazon would start to mirror the makeup and the kind of the Marvel model. Do you think that's what Amy Pascal represents, Math?
It's kind of hard to tell. And by the Marvel model, I'm not quite sure whether you mean. I mean, she has been involved with Marvel, but it's not like she's involved with loads of the TV series as well as as well as these films. It's more these individual franchises within the major franchise,
Yeah.
if you know what I mean. Um, no, I don't. I think it's quite an interesting. collection of films that she's produced, because obviously there's these big ones, and then even the small. So she's done Little Women, and I see as well that she's going to be doing the Chronicles of Narnia adaptations,
Yeah,
both of which are
Narnia.
Greta Gerwig. Uh, she didn't do Barbie, but then looking at who produced Barbie,
Yeah,
David Heyman did. So I wonder if there's any crossover there. But no, I think it shows that she's capable of handling these big budget franchises with big expectations. A lot of people weren't happy with that Ghostbusters. I think a lot of that is unfair. And yeah, and I think it's just she's clearly experienced. She's not someone who's coming into this as a novice. She's actually, as you said, she's older than Barbara Broccoli. In some ways, I'm thinking, could they have done any better? I'm not sure. I know, some people are reticent about Amy Pascal. I don't know whether that's based on Ghostbusters or based on Spider-Man, but those three films are pretty popular, and they're not my favorite films in the world, but so there's a decent quality to them, and they're not like absolute rubbish. And the Spider-Verse films as well, pretty original,
yeah,
quite sort of daring almost. I think she's someone to be positive about and get behind.
absolutely. I agree. And like you've mentioned, just this, I like that she, although she's not, no one person is really responsible for the Marvel world, but she's responsible for a part of it, and that kind of me to me shows that she has shown a faithfulness to a character within something and also delivered to fans what they would expect without taking it in any kind of outrageous taking it in another outrageous direction away from the world that the fans wanted. The Spider-Man films that she's a part of fit in to that wider world. She has made them fit in, which is, I think, that's something I'd like to see with the Bond, the new Bonds. I want to see that the producers deliver to the fans so that it fits in, so that so that it's taking pride in what it's part of. And I kind of see that with what she's done, and the same goes for Ghostbusters, I would say. What are your thoughts, Chris? Because again, David Heyman, I think initial reactions, I think from what I can remember on WhatsApp, I think you're pretty positive about him. But Amy Pascal was a little bit, well, we didn't quite know immediately. Now that you've had a bit of time to learn more about her, what do you reckon, Chris?
I think the really interesting choices. Like I say, Heyman is probably the more obvious one. Having basically managed what is alongside Bond one of the biggest cinematic franchises of all time, never mind in the last 20, 30 years. So he makes total sense to me. Having worked with developing, a series of books, working with an author who is, fairly notoriously kind of, strict on what wants creative control over her content. So has worked with her, working with multiple directors over a series, not just the same one. So able to adapt, and you can
Yeah,
see, obviously, you see that within the film itself, how
yeah,
the first two and then the third one really changes the tone, the production, and that sort of carries on for the later ones, but they still feel kind of like individual films. So I think that's really important to consider, that he's obviously still allows artistic kind of expressions, or risks within the series. You look at, like say, you look what Chris Columbus did for the first two, and then Alphonse Cuarón did for the third one. That's a big leap in terms of production style, tone, everything in it. And obviously it worked, because the series got even more and more popular, and I think a lot of the people who create, lots of the crews and everything carried on that very distinctive style created by that director. So I think, like, for him, I think he is. I say, with the exception of someone like Christopher Nolan, I can't think of a better, someone to be there as to ground this, and make sure that things move, and there is that overarching kind of creative control, but not letting things go kind of haywire. I think Amy Pascal, again, really interesting choice, and not one I had on my radar, simply because obviously American, and had been doing, a real kind of mixed bag, like you mentioned, some of the productions sort of working with art house sort of directors within the studio system, and then doing these, big sort of blockbuster films. And I think the reason that because it's to do with Spider-Man, the rights were held by Sony, weren't they? And that's why
Mm.
they're a separate thing to the Marvel universe. But they do kind of connect, and that's why Venom is a Sony film, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, so I think it's really interesting that they've got her, and I think maybe that's again, maybe it's seen as is a political is I don't know, is it a political one to have a man and a woman, produce something what is seen as a very kind of male centric character and world, and that kind of offers a little bit of balance, like with Michael and Babs. So it's quite interesting, but I think they're both really interesting choices, and I'm really looking forward to see what they can do. I think
Yeah.
there is I say, as we heard the news, there's a real sense of excitement, and that's brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, we'll perhaps talk about that later about kind of just the excitement and the next steps from here. Um, yeah, but we have now a partnership, and we've spoken there about Amy Pascal. Well, now let's focus more on David Heyman. Like you said, his name made a lot more sense in terms of we could perhaps, if we'd really thought about it, probably predicted that he might attach himself to a similar franchise as James Bond. And what you were talking about there with all the Harry Potter films and also the subsequent ones in terms of Fantastic Beasts he's been involved with. I think he's going to be involved with the new TV series as well. He, again, like Amy Pascal, attaches himself to a franchise, to a character, to the canon of and the catalogue of output. He wants to be involved. He wants to be an overseer. And just as you were saying it, I mean, it's probably occurred to me already, but I loved hearing you talk about it in terms of he has in the Harry Potter series, David Heyman has overseen a progression and a kind of an evolution of a character and a change in tone as it's gone from director to director. But he's always been there. He's overseen that, and he's seen it from the start and to the end, kind of. Not that I want Bond to come to an end, but he has an overarching view, which is great. He's not a producer that's going to attach himself to a director and keep going with this with similar output. He's someone who seems like the character is first, and then let's see which director, which storytelling writers we go to next, kind of, and screenplays. But he seems like someone who will always be there. If I go to him, I mean, we talked about age and nationality. David Heyman is English. He's born in London in 1961, so he's quite similar. He's 64 by my calculations. His birthday will be 26th of July if we're wanting to just know that one as well. But yeah, he so he is this Englishman and we've got an American woman, but and obviously Harry Potter is kind of a almost as a almost well, perhaps what do you think? An equal status with James Bond in terms of you got books, films, merchandise, theme parks. It's a real rival to James Bond, if not at the moment, well ahead, really. So that makes sense. But let's just look at some of his others because he's not just a Brit doing British stuff. He was involved in the recent Wonka film, but like Matt mentioned, the Barbie film, which is an interesting one, and maybe one that you'd be more thinking Amy Pascal might be attached to. He's been part of the Paddington films, which again are perhaps more of another British thing, but he's attached himself to the films and the TV series, and actually he's seen another British thing become a worldwide hit, which is what we want to see, isn't it? Um, and then the Fantastic Beasts films, as I mentioned, Marriage Story, which is quite interesting. And then Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he was attached as a producer there. And if we're going back, let's go. I think perhaps the most notable one, and where I think he received some nominations, was Gravity, back in 2013, and that was really an event movie on its own at the time. And we'll kind of talk about the links that he has with that and other Harry Potter, links with directors. I Am Legend, if we go back to 2007, and these are, American event blockbusters. I'm really encouraged by this combination, I think, where we've got David Heyman, who seems like a very strong, steady pair of hands who is capable of overseeing huge franchises, really. And then we've got Amy Pascal, who's a little bit lesser known, but loves her characters, loves seeing, overseeing like mini franchises, smaller franchises, and she'll have a lot to offer there. Um, as a combination, do you think that? I mean, we don't know for sure, but do you think that they are very, very different and that is their strength, or do you think they've been picked together? Do you think that they were picked as a pair, or do you think they were looking for two different people and Amazon have brought them together? It can only be speculation, but what do you think, Matt?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think, well, firstly, it's interesting, people really, worried about what Amazon were going to do. I don't think these two people are yes people, like I'm sure they will be given a brief about probably what Amazon are wanting to do, but particularly with the film, these two people have been involved with, as we say, other franchises with expectations, with studios wanting certain things, and they've stuck with them, and um, but they've also been involved with different, other things that aren't franchises and own individual stories and dramas and different kind of genres. But in terms of, I I would probably guess that Heyman might have been the one that they were after. That was, the main one because it is what amongst the most similar things to Bond, as we've kind of said, a British a British thing that they want to keep British, um, and that has lasted for a long time with those expectations, dealing with changes of director and things like that, but keeping that steadiness behind the scenes, and launching that, the casting and everything in the Harry Potter films. It's pretty good. I mean, I think it's widely held view that they were almost cast perfectly, those films, in a lot of ways. Perhaps one the odd character might not be, but so I mean I've no idea, but I think personally probably he was he was somebody they were keen to get, whether they managed to get Amy Pascal or not. And then they probably wondered who could complement. We
Yeah.
want a duo. We want a male and female. Perhaps we want an English person and an American person. Who would complement David Heyman? And getting a woman who's also experienced, but in a different kind of way, and bringing that combination together, I think it's interesting. I think it's we might not have been able to think of it, but I think it's sensible but not boring, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
I think it's a good move from what I can see.
I mean, the next we talked before about who's going to direct, who's going to be Bond, but this had to be the first step, really, didn't it? These were, now we know who the creative eyes are, and if you think about all the other people it could be, there'd be some producers out there who'd be a little bit either concerned or worried because they have a certain style or a certain penchant for taking cinema in a direction that's quite obscure or anything like that. But I don't, with these two, I feel reassured. I feel confident. I don't get any sense of, oh, this is 50-50. This could go, it could go well, but it could, it feels much more positive than negative. And like you kind of said, maybe David Heyman was the main pull, but it's going to be interesting seeing them as a pair. And because they are now the voice of creative control, really. It might be in the coming days, in the coming weeks, we do hear from them as a pair. They will give more interviews. We will get updates from them. Well, it's exciting that they'll be working as a pair. Chris, when you think of them kind of being the creative control, we've kind of talked about it a little bit, this relationship with Amazon. Do you think now the ball is with them and they're going to start running. Do you think that's what we're going to see, or do you think it's going to be quite a few more names that are thrown into it that Amazon are putting together?
no, I think that I think Amazon will have carefully chosen what seemed to be the most suitable sort of candidates to take the franchise forward. And it's clear that Amazon are basically saying we spent a lot of money on purchasing MGM. We want something in return for that, and we are excited about having this character. And that's what I think. Do you think that that is driving this? I think with Jeff Bezos posting on Twitter X, that who would you cast as? But I think it all feeds in that as a that there were loggerheads with Eon, and then this is now allowing the wheels to start moving. And I like you say, I think choosing the producer, showrunner, or whatever you want to sort of describe them is clearly the best choice because they will have overarching control over it, and then they will be running with it. And I think that I think there's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of kind of worry about Amazon's involvement, but I have that we've never been this has never happened with Amazon. So we have no basis to say, oh, actually it's going to be full of Amazon advertising or it's going to be watered down or anything like that. This has never happened. They've never bought a franchise this big and done anything with it. And even the stuff that they have made has usually been kind of fairly well received or kind of disappeared into the ether fairly quickly. But that can be said about 90% of what Netflix produce every year. I think that I have faith that Amazon will actually put their money where their mouth is and say, we are going to give you the money that you need to make a Bond film. You are now in control. You go and start making this Bond film. And I think that's something that needed to happen. I think we were absolutely kind of just there was no movement. This is hopefully going to get things kind of kick-started again. And two very experienced producers leading the way, I think we're in a brilliant position.
To back up what you're saying as well, the at the same time these rumors are coming out a week or two ago, the other slight thing that was thrown out there was that it's been assigned a $250 million budget, if you remember, which I think this is the same as No Time to Die. So, and if this turned out to be true, maybe that's true as well. And like you said, maybe it is that they've found their people, they've got the money, you go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think money is obviously it isn't it's never going to be stopped. This I think Amazon won't throw money after it. Good money after bad. I think they will say, right, yes, you are assigned, and we feel that $250 million is more than enough. Look at what the Russo brothers have churned out over at Netflix with Electric State. It's $350 million worth, and that is not that's not a sign of quality. I think 250 million now maybe doesn't go as far as it used to. It's a lot of money, but I think inflation costs, depending on where you're shooting it, it is a lot of money that goes into production. That's before obviously you start paying kind of stars and stuff. 250 for a big studio film is more than enough. And I think if you start getting to stupid money, then it ends up being wasteful, and I think that's when you start seeing lack of creativity on the screen. I think the fact that they've allocated that budget and it's not like, well, we can write a check as big as you like, I think is a good sign. It means that actually there are parameters to this, and you have to work with it like any other film production. And maybe even the producer said we feel that that's a good amount of money as a first pass, as a
Yeah.
for the series, and we can go maybe bigger next time. But let's just get it right first time round.
When Amazon kind of took creative control, there are a lot of jokes, a lot of things circulating on the internet about Amazon, the Amazon model, Jeff Bezos, money, and all this. But 200, like you say, 250 million with these two producers, this isn't silly. Neither of those things are silly, and they are more under control and modest than you'd kind of expect for, well, as some people mocking Amazon kind of for what they'd expect from Amazon. Um, this isn't really that. This is what appears to be certainly steady hands, not people who are taking silly risks or anything like that, and risks that haven't paid off, or they're not producers who did well a while back but are struggling recently. These are current producers who are currently producing successful films, and they've got a decent budget there that is reasonable, very, very reasonable.
I wonder if
Um,
they'd learnt their lesson from other Amazon productions like the Lord of the Rings series, where
yeah,
they threw so much money at that. But the showrunners themselves, that was their first go at running a TV series. Never mind one of the biggest TV series, in production history. So I think maybe that has fed into some of the decision making here. Actually, we need, a good, and like I say, who better when you're thinking of who can manage a massive franchise. You're thinking Harry Potter straight off, and then you are potentially thinking kind of Marvel or something of that ilk. But really, you're never going to get any of that because they're already too tied up to it. So I think I wonder if that is sort of feeding into the decisions.
we talked about how you can engage kind of on social media, and when the news came out, we kind of put a video out on stories, reels, whatever you call them, and kind of encourage you guys to vote to kind of express how happy you were as fans about this. And at the moment, the vote stands at 96% say yes, they're happy with this, which is great. I mean, I did see one comment on one of our posts saying proper fans won't be too happy with this. Um, but I think there's always going to be this element of caution from some fans and wanting to really protect what they think is right for Bond. Um, so even though we've talked about it being a steady pair of hands and a controlled budget, these two will still have to win people over a little bit, and Amazon are still having to win over people. And I think for me that further for me solidifies the idea that Amazon are going to be sensible. They're going to list. They want to get it right as well, and they're not doing something to show off. I think in these producers, they are picking quality and consistency and kind of something that's really tried and tested. What would you say is if we're kind of stepping into the future next, what the next thing is? Do you think we're just gonna go into a bit of radio silence now as these two do more of their kind of recruiting, casting, and all that? Or do you think we're gonna get lots of updates here?
My feeling is that we're going to get updates quite soon, um, because this has come about quite quickly. It's not been that long that we had the news about the change of, it's not that long since we were having a podcast, an episode about the impasse. But in the time then, with it, how quickly has it changed? And these two people have come on board, and I imagine that Amazon want to, they've already given it a budget. They've got these producers. They're not. This isn't going to be, I said on that episode 2030. No, no, much sooner. I think now. I do think 2027 perhaps, um, and I think it will be interesting to see what way round they now start to do things. Whether they get some writers in, um, or whether they get a director in, um, or whether they cast, because a director might want to be involved with the casting, but I wouldn't necessarily think. I mean, I'm not quite sure what's happened in each of the franchises that these people have produced, but with them involved, it's a bigger thing than just one director. Getting all the different cogs behind the scenes working. I think we'll get news fairly soon. I think we'll hear about what directors they're after. Um, we'll hear the names, but we've been hearing, possible names for Bond for a long time now. Yeah, so I think it'll be quite soon. And the interesting thing is this will be a bit different to Marvel, certainly the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where it might be that Heyman and Pascal go for this approach, but how they go for directors who haven't done big budget things or whatever before, whereas clearly David Heyman and even uh, perhaps Amy Pascal, but more David Heyman. Um, for Harry Potter, as Chris mentioned, Chris Columbus, getting him in for the first two, what a, absolutely perfect. He'd done big budget family films with children actors and stuff before, with quite big budget films, but perfect for that. And then building on that, getting Alfonso Cuarón in, who's an outstanding director. Real, visionary director and everything, and then carrying that on. Mike Newell, he wasn't a small name to carry on. And then, interestingly, I think from there on in, it was David Yates. There might have been one more. Was it all David Yates, who was a bit a lesser known person, but I think the decision to do that was kind of about getting someone in because they wouldn't then want to keep changing the tone and keep changing the director as they were reaching sort of the end of the books. They wanted that story to almost come together. Um, so the point I'm kind of making is that I think, the possibilities in terms of director are quite not unlimited, but they're not just going to get any old person, or I think it's almost up to them whether they want someone who's not quite as experienced and someone who they can, who will want to put their all into it, but will be will listen to them and be guided, um, or someone like Alfonso Cuarón who can come in, make this a big film. He knows how to work with a big budget and deliver, brilliant results. So yeah, I think we'll start hearing things in the coming weeks. I do. I might be
I
wrong. I might be wrong, but that's
well,
my feeling.
these rumor articles that came out again, the 250 million budget was mentioned, and I think that Amazon wants it for 2027. That year has been put out there. In my view, the more progress we get like this with names, the more distant Amazon are becoming from the project, which I think is perhaps a positive thing in some ways. And when we talk about who's going to be chosen as director, you now feel that it's not going to be Amazon's choice who's director. Now we're thinking it's going to be David Heyman and Amy Pascal's choice as who's going to be director. And I think that should fill people with those anyway. That those who were less confident should surely improve their confidence. I don't know either way about if Amazon, if Amazon had appointed who they'd go for, but in David Heyman and Amy Pascal, it will be those people who are attracting cast, crew, directors, editors, composers, writers. These now are the two names who are going to recruit. These are the two people that are going to excite people about the franchise and prove that whether it's Amazon or not, it's about James Bond. We are all here to restart this new era of James Bond as a franchise.
Well, we've had quite a bit of news as Bond fans recently, and it just feels like a great time to be alive now, and a time where we can all come together as a fandom and fully support the future of 007, because I, for one, have been pretty disillusioned with the franchise, not just the delay, but every film, probably since Quantum, seems to have been taking on a direction of its own. It doesn't seem to have been planned or thought through much. And whilst I'm okay with them having Bond films consecutively where they don't really need to have watched the previous one, it was quite nice what they were doing with Quantum and Casino Royale, but they didn't follow through with that. And yes, there's been great films since then, great moments in the films, but it's certainly become apparent in the last few weeks. We've heard from Barbara and Michael that they did seem to be coming to an end, that they did want to move on with their own lives, and they've allowed Amazon to take full creative control of the franchise. And then this news comes out today that we are to get some new producers, and that is quite a seismic thing, isn't it? If you look back to the early 60s when it all began, it was the Broccoli family. And yes, there's been producers on other films, Kevin McClory, it's not all about Eon, but they are, 95, 96, 97% of Bond for me as producers. And Cubby in particular is the godfather, as many called him. And to have his figure looming large over the whole series, that continued after his death. And certainly Barbara took on that mantle with Michael G. Wilson. And by and large, they did a great job. But they're gone now, and you've got to move on. And I think what we can look forward to now is a very professional, glossy production, because these two names, I'm not an expert in film production and all that, but even I've heard of David Haymon, certainly. You can't help but know these names because they're British, which I know some people are very, very pleased with. I'm not particularly bothered what country you're from, what you look like, as long as you produce a good Bond film. Cubby was American, Barbara, American, Michael G. Wilson, American, so I don't buy that. But here we've got a couple again, and I think that's been done to emulate the power couple of Barbara and Michael, and before that, of course, Cubby and Harry Saltzman. So I think when you've got two, it does work better because you've got someone to bounce off, particularly in these early stages where you're moving on, and you do need a bit more than one person, I think, having every creative decision in the end. Of course, they will allow others to get involved. They will get other producers, I'm sure, on board, perhaps, but they certainly will get their own team of a director and writers. And that'll be the next thing. I think we'll be looking forward to that announcement fairly soon, quicker than you might think. And then, of course, a new 007 himself. So we've got a very exciting year to look forward to. And I think these two names, I don't know a lot about them, particularly Amy Pascal, but they've got a good track record in terms of the films they've been involved with. Most of those films I thought were very good. And even if you didn't like them, they were very successful, most of them. So you want a producer who's got a good image in terms of a vision for the project. And with Bond, I still keep saying it's quite a basic vision that you need. You don't need to change the wheel. We've got all the nuts and bolts there. We've got all the brilliant things in the franchise to go on and draw from. They're at their disposal. And now they've got a fresh take on it. They'll have to get a slightly fresh take on it. And audiences will be new. Audiences are younger. So it's a big job ahead of them. Now, those two have got so much experience behind them, and particularly they've got the respect of the industry. So I think pats on the back to Amazon for getting them. The statement only says it's one film, so that'll be interesting. I think that could be a good thing, rather than this whole mapped out universe of films, tie-ins, everything like that people are so worried about. If it says it's for one film, then you know that these two are big hitting producers. That means the films are going to be the main focus, certainly. And of course, if this one's great and if they enjoyed it, they're going to continue, I would have thought. The only other thing we'll add is the statements from Amazon MGM themselves. Now, this was from the head of film there, Courtney Valenti, and she described them as two of the most accomplished, experienced and respected film producers in our industry. So that's quite telling. She went on to say that we're honoured to be working with them on James Bond's next chapter and are excited to deliver to global audiences storytelling, there we go, that upholds the impeccable legacy of this beloved character. So there we go. Great news, and I think we're going to get more and more news as the weeks come on. James Bond is going to return, and look, we're going to hopefully get more new memories, not just harking back to the old days. Remember when you first saw that? Unbelievable feeling growing up. Remember when you first saw this, and you saw it on the film Goldfinger? Life-changing. Yes, remember when you saw this? Yes, the Vanish, or when you didn't see it. Anyway, we're going to be getting new memories like that. Bring it on, come on.
Thinking about the next steps, the directors, and where we might go from there, Matt mentioned kind of the structure of the Harry Potter films and how they were brought together as productions and how production was kept in the UK for those. And I know that's been another slight concern for Bond fans, that it's in Amazon's hands, it's going to be taken out of the UK and it's going to become a little bit less recognisable. Chris, do you think having David Heyman involved could kind of strengthen the ties to British production?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the fact that obviously the productions for Harry Potter were kept in the UK, that he's obviously worked with all the UK crew, facilities. I think Warner Brothers themselves are invested in facilities in the UK off the back of the success of Harry Potter. So, and also the thing is that the UK is offering kind of tax breaks and incentives that the US currently aren't. And there was a discussion the other day around that, about how no one is filming in LA anymore because there's just no incentives to do that. Therefore, crew are obviously not working. while the countries are kind of saying, well, you come here, and the UK is one of them because we have a long, rich history of filmmaking and some of the best crew in the world. And you ask anyone, Spielberg, Lucas, they will all say that. And obviously, Bond being such a British, kind of character. And again, films, we have, studio facilities named after that character, named after the producers, named after the actors who played in that. I think it would make total sense for production to carry on in the UK. Why you wouldn't do that is beyond me. That is the base. Why would you mess with something that's clearly working not only for the Bond series but also for other productions produced by that producer? So for me, it's a non-brainer. I think production will continue in the UK as is, and again, there is. I understand that there are sort of major concerns about Amazon's involvement, but again, I think it's just kind of like I say, there's a lot of speculation, and I think just have to treat this as fairly positive. I think also there's this sort of worry about what we're going to do with the series and the character and all these little things. I think even the most ardent Daniel Craig fan must admit that he was going off the rails a little bit towards the end of his tenure. So let's not get all too kind of preachy or too precious about what Eon was doing with that production. But yeah, I think definitely would absolutely make sense that it would stay in the UK.
And it's, when you kind of think about this, it's another reason you might realize that, yeah, David Heyman is a very smart choice, and I'm to be very grateful because, again, it could have been two very Hollywood-based American producers, but it's not. Amazon have chosen British-based David Heyman, which is surely something that fills those concerned fans with a bit more confidence. In terms of the appointment of director, Matthew kind of talked about the structure of the Harry Potter films and how they were willing to try out different directors with slightly different tones, but obviously it was all in keeping with the story that was being told. And then eventually they kind of stuck with one name to kind of finish off the series. But there is, in fact, one name within the Harry Potter franchise that is perhaps standing out more than others, and it was someone who appeared in the middle on the third film, and that's Alfonso Cuarón, and that is he's an actor who's obviously well recognized and acclaimed director, but it is his name that's been rumored to be attached, and another rumor circulating was that he had pitched his take on James Bond to Amazon or maybe to the producers, and he has worked before with David Heyman on Prisoner of Azkaban and Gravity. There must be something in this, do you think, Matt?
I mean, maybe not must be something in this. There might be something in it. Yeah. Since he did Prisoner of Azkaban, things have changed for him. He's gone on to other things and quite a few more personal films or individual films. Still having his own kind of incredible visual style and almost visual tricks and like innovative ways of filming things. But that was the case. I'm pretty sure Children of Men was before Harry Potter, I think.
I think it was after.
Yeah,
Was it? Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. So clearly, he's in a different place. There is a difference with Harry Potter. With Harry Potter, and obviously we're focusing on David Heyman here. There is Amy Pascal as well, but just looking at Harry Potter, they knew how many books there were. They knew where the story was going, and to a degree, and how many films. And I know they ended up doing the last book as two films, but with this is like clean slate. And interestingly, they have said one film, and I think in our WhatsApp group, Tom's mentioned that a listener of the show, Steve Spring, has mentioned. He said maybe that's quite a good thing. If they'd said something like for three films or five films or for 10 years, then you start thinking, right, they've got a plan for a five film story arc where at the end of it, you know we've been wanting solo missions or certainly a one film approach. So That could work one of two ways, because one of the problems with Eon is that they were sort of doing that, but then tried to retrospectively make it into a 5 film arc. But I get the feeling these guys are probably a bit, if I say smarter, that's probably a bit unfair on Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, but they're more experienced in these things. So Alfonso Cuarón, it doesn't surprise me to see his name linked. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
You
Maybe he's ready to do a big studio franchise film.
in our
Yeah.
episode where we focused on the directors that we thought could do a Bond film, we all listed 3 or 4 each. He was one of yours, wasn't he, Chris? He was one of the
It was.
directors that you mentioned even at that stage. Why was that? What was it about him that you thought could be Bond worthy?
I think he just is able to. He's very versatile and he understands the material. Like he understands, like with Harry Potter, he sort of saw, and I think a lot of the fans saw what Chris Columbus did. Like I say, was the setting up of things, and like he was very much a safe pair of hands. Um, and it was a great choice for the first two. But then for him, who had, I think he was it Secret Garden. He had previously worked with children, so he had that experience. But then to put his own creative stamp on it, and obviously that really had a kind of an impact on the rest of the series. I think he can work with that. So I think he's very versatile. I think something like Children of Men, which is a fantastic thriller, and again, he's so good at creating worlds.
Yeah.
Using like I say, just taking something and it's sort of elevating. That was P.D. James, novel, and so like I say, just elevating the content into something a little bit more interesting. I just think he's a really good choice. Who has for a number of years straddled the line between kind of those personal kind of films like Roma, and then going off and doing Gravity, and then kind of going that sort of back and forth. He just kind of stands out as someone who I think would, and it's quite interesting that he's also, if it is true, that he has been proactive and actually wanted to pitch. They've not had to go to him, and that again is really exciting. That you've actually got a filmmaker who feels passionate about this character or this material to actually pursue it, and he is of that caliber. I think that's really, we can't ask for more. And I just think he would be, like I say, just a really interesting choice. But like I say, whether people want that, I don't know, because we have discussed in the past on other episodes that really we want. Does the series really need an sort of overpowering creative force behind the camera? Do we actually want more of a safe pair of hands and more of a Chris Columbus in this case, like a John Glenn, someone who really understands the material but doesn't get in the way and make it too flashy? And I think, like Matt pointed out, he does have a habit of going a little bit long takes, very creative camera work. Do I want that in a Bond film? Not really. It's not my to my taste. But I just think it's really fascinating that he's already in the mix so soon, and I think I do think he would make whatever Bond he made, it would be interesting. It wouldn't be vanilla, and I think that's a good thing.
Just
Matt, yeah.
just on Alfonso Cuarón, something I forgot about him is that he recently did for Apple TV Disclaimer, which was like a psychological TV series, psychological thriller, which I thought was really good. And probably one of those that would have been a film 20 years ago, maybe. But whilst there were some visual, not tricks, but you know what I mean, styles and different, there was still a story told throughout that series, and one which was really well told. I thought he is able to attract, a quality cast, and the best in class, as Tom keeps saying. Um, so yeah, sorry, I forgot about that, and I forgot that that was what he'd done probably most recently. So I just wanted to mention it.
Yes. The story goes that Guillermo del Toro was the one who recommended he does Harry Potter.
Yeah.
And because part of me thinks, would someone like Alfonso Cuarón really be interested in Harry Potter? Would he really be interested in doing Bond? And so then when I read up about him doing Harry Potter, there was that story about it, and then I wondered why didn't he do a follow-up? Did he only just want? But it was Children of Men that came after, and he went on to do that. That was there was kind of a clash. So it's not that he turned, he didn't want to pursue Harry Potter any further. It was just that he had something different, a different direction to go. And then like you've kind of said, if the suggestion that he's pitched an idea for his own for Bond, that is a positive sign. And we've talked recently about films, particularly in the Daniel Craig era, where there were directors who really the producers were going to them hoping that they'd do them a favor, whether they like Bond or not. It would be great if these rumors are true that Alfonso Cuarón is just as keen as David Heyman, and that to kind of bring it together. And also, like we've mentioned with David Heyman, even if Alfonso were to do one, I wouldn't be worried if we've got someone like David Heyman who he'll still be there and he'll appoint the next someone. As producers, the two of them will keep moving on. They're not going to become smitten or obsessed by a certain vision. They will keep the thing ticking along, whoever the director is, and they'll find someone else. Is there anything else to mention, would you say, about directors? Because now that we've got to... yeah, go on, Matthew.
I think so. I think the link, if there is any kind of link between these two, it seems to be Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach, her husband, because mentioned Amy Pascal produced Little Women and is doing the Chronicles of Narnia.
Which is Greta Gerwig.
Yeah. David Heyman produced Barbie and also Marriage Story, which you mentioned, which was written and directed by Noah Baumbach. So I find that interesting. I don't know whether... I mean, clearly, if Greta Gerwig is going to be doing these Chronicles of Narnia films, I don't know whether she'll be wanting to be doing Bond films, and I don't know whether that's something she would be good at or anything like that. But I just found that interesting that was the overlap that I saw, and so whether there's anything in that, who knows?
Of course, there'll be all kinds of relationships and friendships behind the scenes that we don't know about, tying all kinds of producers. You hear that Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson were friends with Christopher Nolan, kind of, and yet nothing would be produced together on that. But we were at the start of the conversation, we were kind of rooting for the link between these two, and I think that's the best theory, Matt, definitely, that brings them together. And then if we were wondering whether Amazon approached one and then the other, or got them both, it's therefore likely that they have come as a pair. They are not completely independent of each other if they do have that link, which is also encouraging, I'd say. And if they do have those links, then also it's their links to other directors. So it doesn't mean that it's all based on David Heyman, Harry Potter, Alfonso Cuarón. There is a bigger world here where both these producers have come across many other accomplished directors and kind of been involved with them. Are you even thinking that Greta Gerwig might involve herself with a Bond film, Matt?
Well, I don't. I'd be surprised for the reasons I've said, but who knows? Maybe in the future. Because obviously, kind of Barbie was a bit of a different thing. But yeah, I mean, I wasn't necessarily saying that, but I mean, it was just interesting. And Noah Baumbach isn't known for doing big franchise action adventures, I don't think. But it was just something I noticed. But as you've been saying, I think these appointments, or whatever you want to call them, have really changed things and how we look at what Amazon are doing. Because before it was like, Amazon are going to pick such and such, and it's almost come as Chris says about the Rings of Power thing, because not getting experienced showrunners might have been something that has hampered them in some ways. Although we should say that the first series, some mixed reviews. I think the second series was more well reviewed, probably the more they've learned about it. But one of the things that you kept seeing when Rings of Powers Amazon will produce 1 billion all the time. The budget mentioned, I think it's 250 million is a lot of money. Of course it is, but it's not like the most expensive film ever made.
No.
So I just think that these bits of news we've had in the last day or so are really encouraging. And now it doesn't become Amazon this, Amazon that. It'll be Heyman and Pascal this, Heyman and
Yeah.
Pascal that. You know, but how many times did we, when we were thinking of the Bond stuff? I know it was a bit different because Eon was their thing, but it was always like, what will Barbara and Michael do? Usually, what will Barbara do? But now we've got these people who are behind the scenes. These are the consistent people. Um, if something doesn't work, you've still got these consistent people who, I imagine will want to protect the history and everything, and not. I just get the sense these two, won't be ones trying to make completely different films from one to the next and do innovative, make ridiculous decisions. They'll want to make blockbuster films that appeal to fans, appeal to audiences, and that will potentially have a future.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing, when you've linked it the way that you have and what links them as a pair, these are credible people and they are within credible circle, as in they do have a lot of respect in the franchise. They are well regarded. I suppose the one thing to possibly consider is, will the two of them work well with Amazon? Will it, Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli couldn't work with Amazon. Do you think these two are direct replacements for Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson, or do you think the fact that Amazon have appointed them means we're already off to a very secure footing? What do you reckon, Chris? Is there still just the possibility that it's, it could be a little bit anxious to start with as a new kind of formation of people?
Yeah, I'm sure there will be that. I think, like I say, this is new territory for Amazon and the producing team. I said they've never dealt with something, like I say, Heyman has dealt with this series, but there's Harry Potter and then there's the Bond series. I think the Bond series is still bigger, is still much more global, obviously longer running. So I do think there will be a little bit of trepidation in terms of, like say, I'm hoping that they will turn to Amazon and say, look, you've appointed us, let us do the producing, let us be control of the creative side of things. We will get you a Bond film by X date. Trust us, we've got plenty of experience to do that. And that's what I'm really hoping will be the case. But yeah, I think if that this is obviously something that Amazon are really really keen to pursue, and I think that is exactly what this franchise needs. And I'm sure that when Ian were dealing with Amazon, they were coming at it in a maybe a slightly hostile way because they had bought the studio that they were part of, and then it was a bit of a kind of like I say, a bit of a a sort of kind of aggressive purchase. But I think and also there is a slightly it's much more deeply personal for the two producers at the Eon because this is the literally their father's legacy, and and obviously we're much more protected of it rather than someone who's coming in and saying, I love the Bond franchise, I'd
Yeah.
love to have a crack at this and make something of it, is very different to my father built this up, over decades. We work with a lot of the same crew, work at the same facilities, all that sort of stuff. So there is bound to be much more emotions involved in that than with something that is someone who's coming at it with fresh eyes and a fresh book. And I think if I was either of them, I would be so excited to have the opportunity to create something new based off this property that is so well known. In the same way that I'm sure he's really excited about the Harry Potter TV series, because again, that's a fresh start on something that is known. And I think I think that's exactly what this franchise needed now, is that that fresh blood, that bit more hustle. Let's actually do something and get something on. We've had too many breaks, we've had too many delays. Let's get things do it, and all the signs are really positive so far. So again, I'm not I'm not I don't feel like I'm in the position to sort of question any decisions. I ultimately think that appointing these two is a really smart move, and hopefully, let's say, we'll start seeing progress quickly.
Well, first I've got to say, Amazon, they're just not messing about, are they? They are not messing about. They clearly must have been frustrated with the lack of movement that had been going on with Barbara and with Michael, and they want to film. There is absolutely no doubt they want to film. I'm going to start by saying I think this is a great thing. I think it's a great appointment. I think Bond is back. You just look around the news and we're talking about Bond. And for the first time in a long time, we're not talking about speculation. We're actually hearing real news. And it's excitement and it's growing. I think the speed at how things have moved in the last few weeks since his appointment, I mean, it's not even finalised till May, shows how frustrated they were and shows the plans they were putting in place behind the scenes previously anyway. Yeah, it's just a great thing. I know I've heard a lot of people maybe have a bit of doubts and stuff about, especially Amy Pascal, but let's just stop and just look at her credentials for a first minute. She's produced the Spider-Man series, which all in all has been very, very successful. I absolutely love the Spider-Verse films. I think they are some of the most creative films going. Regardless of if some people claim about the box office of some of those films, one thing you can never deny about those films is that she's got the casting right. And that is a really exciting thing looking forward to the casting of Bond, obviously. She's got experience of Bond. She's got experience, obviously, being part of distributing and producing under Sony the first 3 Craig films. And they are the most successful ones, all in all. And I actually think if Craig's era stopped at those 3, he would be looked at far more favourably than he is now. He certainly would be with me, because it's actually after that period that things have really tailed off. Skyfall, obviously, first billion-dollar Bond film. So we've got someone with some pedigree. We've got someone who actually has understanding of how Bond films work. And I think what we're going to get somebody who respects the franchise, who understands the franchise, and someone who's going to want to bring a big barnstorming film. And I think that's even more with regards to the appointment of David Heyman. David Heyman, I'm really, really, really excited about. I've been going a long time about Bond is the jewel in the crown of British cinema. Who else to get than the producer of the next biggest jewel in the crown of British cinema with the Harry Potter films, who doesn't just do them, but he's produced the 3 Paddington films. Films again that make you proud to be British. If there is one thing that James Bond should do for Brits, is make them be proud to be British, make them be patriotic. The whole thing's about for Queen and country. This man totally gets it. It's an excellent appointment. He's also done some really critically fantastic films, critically praised films, and great box office films as well. And obviously he's got these links with Alfonso Cuarón, which I know he's a bit babyish. Everyone's talking about that, but that's a possible name that will be brought up because of his links there. I just think this is good news. And I know the naysayers are going to be saying, oh, this, and oh, it's too soon, and they're going to ruin it. We just don't know. And the good thing is with this is that they've announced it as one film. Now, it may not be that it's just one film. It's probably a case of it's the film to show that they can do it, and then they'll move from it from there. But having said that, I do think this will be a reasonably short-term appointment for both of these people. They are both similar age to Barbara Broccoli. In fact, both possibly older. There's not going to be serious longevity. It's probably going to be overseeing the short term, the next maximum maybe 10 years and stuff. But in that, you've got some of the biggest names in Hollywood doing this. people who understand Bond and people who understand British cinema. And I think that even if they move into those exec roles, they are going to set a template that is just going to be so good for the future. I have got to be honest, at first when I heard about this Amazon stuff, it's not that I was against it, but I was a bit like, well, it's interesting, let's see what's happening. But the speed these decisions be making, it's exciting. It's right exciting. And I think the next thing we're going to hear is who the next James Bond is. I really do. Because I think they're going to be on this. And I do not think they're going to get it wrong. Guys, Bond is back. And we need to buckle in. Because it's just going to keep going and going. And this is a great time to be a Bond fan. Beginning of this year, we were all depressed. Been 4 years plus since No Time to Die, and that was James Bond dead. Now we're talking. So for me, this is exciting.
Hey guys, so sorry I couldn't be there for tonight's get together to discuss another moment of great, amazing James Bond news that has, well, it seems like has come out of nowhere. Obviously they're getting their skates on. It's absolutely wonderful. In 3 weeks since the announcement that Amazon have taken control, we now have a production team in just 3 weeks, so I know everyone was really worried about spin-offs and we're going to get, Q's Nanny's spin-off series or whatever. No, what they've done is they've gone straight in with assembling a production team, a production duo that have elite Hollywood filmmaking pedigree in terms of blockbusters. So you can't really argue with any of this, can you? I mean, it's absolutely brilliant and it's so desperately exciting. Again, 3 weeks have gone by since the announcement that Amazon are taking over creative reins, and we've got progress. And I don't like saying this, but this is more progress than we've had in years and years and years, and it's happened within 3 weeks. If you're a Bond fan and you are not excited about this, what's going on? Because this is, I mean, oh dear, again, this feels like Nirvana at the moment, because things are happening. I can actually, oh my word, do I even want to say it? I can actually see Bond 26 getting made now. Oh my word, never mind that. I can see a casting announcement. I can see like a scriptwriter's announcement. This is such an exciting time, at last, to be a Bond fan. And I don't mean that to denigrate any of the production team that's gone before. I really don't. I think they've had an awful lot to work through behind the scenes with the circumstances that they were left with, i.e. a dead James Bond, and the end of the franchise as we knew it. I couldn't be more excited, and I urge other Bond fans seriously to get on board with this and be just as excited, because this wave is moving now. And I, for one, am definitely getting on board with it. So, buckle up, buttercups, it's happening. I'm so excited. Let's do this.
We will now just move into the final part of our conversation. We've talked about directors and how things might be now. But now that we've got Amy Pascal and David Heyman, does that mean it's a completely clean slate across the board? We're talking writers, the composers, the editors, cinematographer. It's something we talked about in the last episode, I think, in terms of it being a completely clean slate. Matt, do you think that's where we're at? Do you think it's almost guaranteed that we're going to see new names in every role?
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I don't know who would. We already know Debbie McWilliams,
yeah,
had stepped down. I can't see Purvis and Wade being, for their involvement to continue. They might feel some loyalty towards Barbara and Michael. I mean, I don't know, but I just can't imagine that Heyman and Pascal will want them to. I think it is a clean slate all round. I hope that it isn't, a change from director to director. So each time a new director comes in, that everything behind the scenes change. I get the feeling again with these two producers that there'll be a steadier, more consistent presence behind the scenes, including stuff like composer potentially, Certainly not, different composer from film to film to film. It might be, one for a few films and then it changes and such. But yeah, I think this is as clean a slate. The first episode was privileged position. This is where we're at now. We're in this privileged position where almost anything is possible in a good way. In a good way, with some parameters. We know that it's a film. We know that at the moment they're just focusing on one. We know that they've got great experience. We know that they clearly will have great relationships within the film industry with, whether it's where to film, who to involve, behind the scenes, in front of the camera. I mean, it's going to sound a bit over the top, and probably this could come back to bite me on the bum, but I don't know how this could be better, really. From where we've been at, I don't know how it could be better. I'm someone who's been banging the drum for Christopher Nolan, and in some ways, will that happen? I don't know whether this reduces the chance of that, possibly, but maybe not. But the problem with that might be that there isn't as much of a long-term vision. This has got long-term vision written all over it. I know they're saying one film, but I think these are as good appointments as we could have had, and the future is as good as it could possibly get.
Yeah, I agree. I feel as confident as ever. Probably the most during my adult conscious lifetime, because I know we have our attachments to Barbara and Michael, but even regardless of what they did up to No Time to Die, since then it's not been a case of they had ideas and they've not been able to share them. They had ideas and they've been bought off. They had ideas, but we never got. The only thing they were telling us is that they had no ideas and they'd made no progress. So for me, it's not like it's been tragically ripped from them as much as it could be. They weren't. It really was nothing at this stage. They weren't making any progress at all. Not that they were telling us that, and like I say, they were quite kind of proudly telling us that we're waiting. Whereas the wait is over now, and there's no telling how long we could have been waiting before all this. Now things are moving, and with a much bigger vision, I think, a much bigger vision overall in terms of the films, and when you've got Amazon behind it, big things are definitely going to be happening. And even so, I love that these names aren't juggernaut name, as in they're not massive names. Like you mentioned, Christopher Nolan, I would still love to see him involved, but this just brings things down under a bit more control than that. Because I love Christopher Nolan. Like I said, I'd love him to be involved. But the danger is that it's one person taking the franchise in a direction. Here we've got two people who will most likely bring on board a collection of other famous names, and it's all going to be much more diluted across a bigger pool of names now, which is very exciting, I think. Matt has been as bold to say that it's as good as a position that he thinks the future of the franchise could be in. Are you as excitable as he is?
Yes, absolutely. I think this is the most excited I've been about the franchise for what feels like a very long time. It feels like it's a clean slate. It's a new start. I think I have major objections about what was happening in the last couple of films about some of the creative choices that have been made. Obviously killing the character off was the biggest one, but I think actually it served quite well as a way of bookending that Eon production. That is now the Eon series is this thing here, and then we carry on afresh, with a new series with new producers, new blood, new, truly bringing, I say, like when every time they bring in a new actor, they always say, "Oh, it's we're going to bring the Bond into the '90s. We're going to bring the Bond into those sorts of things." I genuinely believe that this is an opportunity to do something, really great with the franchise, And I don't think that Amazon, it's not in their interest to sort of just dilute the brand as quickly as they can and just sort of, kind of use it as a cash cow, because I think it's very different. And I think that's what's been discussed before. There's a big difference between Bond and Star Trek and Star Wars and Lord of the Rings, where you've got masses of characters and you can do all sorts of stuff within a universe. Bond is essentially a handful of characters, and most people only know one, and that's the central character. So why would we start watering that down? I think it's great that they're saying it is one film. Let's do one film. Let's get it right, and let's see what they can do. And that's why I find it really exciting. That I love the idea of this just very interesting filmmakers coming forward and say, "I love Bond. I will pursue this, and here's my pitch. Here's my idea for it." And if it doesn't work, then you still get to hear that. And I think that's really going to add something to it, as opposed to it's the same writers writing essentially the same storyline over and over again. You then fall into the sort of tradition of, well, the script's not very good. Well, let me fall off my chair. Let's get someone who's recently won an Oscar to rewrite it, or and that method just was never a great way to deal with that series. And that's why we saw that towards where some of the films, particularly in the last few years, have been very uneven, because that's the approach that they've taken, which is, let's get a story on the page and then we start bringing other people in to fill it out, and then let's look at who's really popular at the moment, let's add them to the franchise. I think what I'm looking for, even though this is a single film, that obviously they're saying it's a single film, I think someone like these producers will have enough foresight and planning to say, right, if this works, what are we going to do next? So if we say, let's look at, how can we continue that? And I think, it would make sense for them to not kind of go off in different directions, or bring in another director who has a completely different style, and then that Bond film looks completely different and the production looks completely different, it's edited different and the music's different. I just don't think that is even on the cards. I think they want to create a fresh start. One of the most iconic characters in cinema history. Let's do it one. Let's be considered. Let's make it really good quality, appeal to as many people as we possibly can. Because ultimately, that's the bigger the fan base, the more money you're going to make, the more popular it's going to be. That's what I think, and I'm hoping that's their main goal here. But yeah, I am really excited about the prospect of going to the cinema in a couple of years' time. Hopefully with my son, and watching it at the cinema and seeing a new Bond film, and feeling really excited about, once that film has been made and coming out and going, right, great, what's next, and feeling excited.
Amazing, Chris. And I totally agree. I think it's the most confident as well. It's not just excitement for me at the moment. It is confidence. I really have confidence in this setup. I believe Amazon, whether they've got, proof of having cinema pedigree and all that, they are going to back this all the way. They are not just going to let it gather moss. They're going to really get this to a really good place where it improves their name as well. I am hoping they're going to use this James Bond franchise to actually better their reputation as themselves as well. And I do think carte blanche was needed, a clean slate, absolutely. It was getting repetitive. They were in a bit of a really strange cycle towards the end of the films that they were producing recently under Eon. And perhaps it's in sad terms or whatever, but it needed this break from what they were doing. And now we have this new turn, this new look ahead. And I am very, very optimistic, I have to say. I'm going to just end by returning to the quote, just to bring you back to what we know and what was released by the news today. Amazon MGM Studios have announced that Amy Pascal and David Heyman will produce the upcoming James Bond film. I mean, even that, just how good.
Yes.
And then we go into their quotes. James Bond is one of the most iconic characters in the history of cinema. So they're already thinking about the iconography of it.
And cinema. Cinema, they mentioned.
They're not trying to think of new ways to represent James Bond. thinking about how iconic and cinema he is. But then I think for those who are still unsure and sad about the perhaps acrimony and how things ended for Barbara and Michael, I like that their quote says, "We are humbled to follow in the footsteps of Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson, who made so many extraordinary films." That is a great touch, and it might fill some people with confidence that because Barbara and Michael are still slightly attached to this, they will still have their names involved in to some degree. And wouldn't it be great if we learn that Amy Pascal and David Heyman have a good relationship with them too, so that it feels like some kind of handing over. Just in that quotation alone, it feels like power is being handed over with a bit of blessing, which is lovely. And then this is how they feel. They feel honoured and excited. That's what we want from producers. Honoured and excited. To keep the spirit of Bond very much alive as he embarks on his next adventure. Come on. How good. Yes, I'll end it there. But before I go, I want you to predict what the next episode is after this.
I think
Episode 9. This episode 9 is new producers. Chris, what is episode 10?
director.
Okay. Matthew?
Probably director, but let's say writers.
Okay. Let's
Be
find
close.
out. Stay tuned, all fans. I want keep a close eye on all the developments. We'll try and record these discussions as they happen, but it's ongoing now. It's underway. Lots is happening. So keep your eyes on everything. Keep your finger on the pulse. Bond 26 is being cooked right now. I think the ingredients are being prepared. So right. See you later for now, and see you in episode 10 when we will talk about the editors. Just check. Yeah. That's right. See you later.